So I get asked all the time about rods and reels and the right rods, the right reels, all that. But I want to talk today about gear ratios. And when it comes to rods and reels, they're basically a tool is what they are. And you're trying to find the right tool to get the job done, to be the most efficient. And most efficient when it comes to presenting your baits, to when you catch a fish, to when you're reeling in and trying to make another cast. So when it comes to my tools, here they are right here. These are all the reels I use out there on the tournament trail. So here I'm just going to talk about them and why I choose each one for each type of application. So first and foremost, the number one reel I use is the Cast King Bassinator Elite. We'll start with the 6:6:1, the slower gear ratio reel. So the different gear ratios, 6:6:1, 8:1, 10:5:1, what do they all mean? I'm not going to get into the technical part of it. Basically, the lower the number, the slower the reel. 6:6:1 is slower than 8:1. 8:1 is slower than 10:5:1. So there you have it. 6:6:1 is kind of the workhorse reel. That's for your bigger baits, the baits you want to work slow. So here I've got the 6:6:1 Bassinator Elite. And this reel is the reel I use when I have to work something slow. So here I've got a big glide bait. So if I'm working a glide bait slow, if I try it on a faster reel, I work it too fast. A lot of your big swim baits and glide baits, you know, it's a real slow cadence, a reel that you've got to work slow. Big spinner baits. The other place that a slower gear ratio really shines is for your big crankbaits. If you've ever fished a big crankbait much, thrown it all day long, you throw it on a faster reel, it just wears you out. So the slower the reel, the more feel you have of that bait. So heck, I remember back in the days when I first started, there was the 4:1, the really slow reels, but a 6:6:1 is a good all-around gear ratio reel, especially for big crankbaits. So your 6:6:1 is your slower workhorse reel, the reel that you use for your bigger baits, for your baits that create a lot more torque in the water, something that's just slow. You want that slower gear ratio reel, and the 6:6:1 really is the reel that gets the job done for me. So here's a new reel to the lineup. This is the Cast King MG12, and I'm just kind of going in order. This is a 7:5:1 gear ratio reel. This reel is more in the lineup because it's a finesse reel. It's got a really shallow spool on it. It's designed for small baits. So a lot of the baits that we used to traditionally have to throw on a spinning rod or have difficulty on a normal bait caster, this thing's designed for little swim baits, Ned rigs, little jerk baits, little crankbaits, stuff that's traditionally hard to cast. This just makes it a lot easier to cast. And it's a 7:5:1 gear ratio reel. So kind of a good all-around reel for those little baits. So this reel is perfect for me in the lineup because I would just soon not throw a spinning rod any more than I have to. So when I can use small baits on this instead of a spinning rod, definitely add it to the lineup. But next on the list is my favorite reel. This is what I throw most of the time, what I prefer to throw most of the time, and it's the Bassinator Elite. This is the 8:1 gear ratio reel. This is kind of the get the job done, do everything. What I prefer this reel for is for most of my moving baits, bladed jigs, normal spinner baits, not big spinner baits, normal spinner baits, you know, have stuff that doesn't create a lot of torque. Square bill crankbaits, a great reel for square bills. It's got the good retrieve for that. I mean, you can use this thing for flipping, pitching, casting, whatever you want to do there. So this is a good all-around reel that traditionally gets the job done. I could throw a lipless crankbait on there. I could throw a swim jig on there, but we'll get into that in a second. So next on the list is 10:5:1. This is the Speed Demon Elite. This is one of the fastest reels out there on the market. But what I love about this reel, you know, before that, I used to throw the 8:1. But when they came out with this reel, it made me more efficient on the water, made me more effective with certain baits. So this is a super fast reel. So baits that I have to work really fast, this is the reel to do the job, get the job done, and be most efficient with it. So, you know, if you've watched this on TV a lot, you see a lot of guys fishing a swim jig and they're working it real fast. With this reel, I can do that. I can do it with this reel, but it's a ton of work. You know, people that have been around for a long time might remember the days of throwing a buzz bait on the old 5:1 gear ratio reels where you had to work really hard to work a buzz bait. So you don't have to do that now. But so like a swim jig, something when I want to work it really fast, this 10:5:1, I can work it at the cadence I need to and not have to work myself to death with it. Another one that's huge is a lipless crankbait. Anybody that's ever fished a lipless crankbait, especially on a slower gear ratio reel all day, you know you work your tail off. With this reel, I can keep that good cadence down with it, but if I want to work it and pump it like we do a lot, this reel really allows you to do that in a very effective way, because I can reel it, kill it, reel it, kill it, and with this cadence, it really gets the job done there really well as well. So next on it, which is this reel is so important for, is flipping and pitching. Anybody that's done much flipping and pitching knows that you know, half the time you're just reeling a bait in, making another pitch. So the faster I can get my bait out of one strike zone to the other, the more efficient and the more effective I'm going to be throughout the day. So ultimately, if you're flipping or pitching, the only time you're really catching a fish is when it's in the strike zone. The rest of the time you're reeling that bait in, you're wasting time. So a faster gear ratio reel, I can get the bait in that much faster, and throughout the day, I might be making another 5 or 10% more presentations than I would be with a slower reel. The other really big part of that is when I pitch into a piece of cover and that big fish comes up and eats it, and then it comes just swimming out of there. We've all had that happen where a fish bites it, you pitch it in there, and before you realize that it swam 10 feet over here, you got to reel down, take up that line, and set the hook. That faster gear ratio allows you to do that. Catch up with that fish faster. You're going to get more hookups and put more fish in the boat. So that's the 10-5-1. So there you have it. There's the 4 different speeds that I would throw in bait casters. 6-6-1 for my big slow baits, 8-1, kind of the all around moving baits, square bills, bladed jigs, all that. Next on the list is the 7-5-1, another good all around gear ratio, but this is primarily for small baits. And then last but not least is the 10-5-1 for my super fast baits, and then for flipping and pitching as well. Next on the list is spinning reels. Spinning reels, I never realized how we just kind of got set in our ways and didn't really think much about gear ratios on spinning reels, because I think we always just were used to, you know, one normal medium gear ratio and didn't think much about it until this reel right here came along, the Speed Demon Elite. It's a 7-4-1 gear ratio reel. It's what I use 90% of the time out there, and most of your presentations on a spinning reel are you're throwing it out there, and in a certain place you're working the bait, not really reeling the bait. You're working the bait, and then you're making another presentation. So if I'm fishing a wacky worm, I throw it out there and I'm shaking the rod, I'm reeling in, making another presentation, almost like flipping or pitching. If I'm drop shotting, I'm throwing it out there, working a certain area just, you know, with the rod, and then I'm reeling in, making another presentation. So that whole premise, just like flipping and pitching, you want that bait to come in that much faster. Or if I hook a fish, I can reel up to that fish that much faster. So I never realized until I started using this how important this gear ratio was and having a faster reel. So the deal for me is the Speed Demon Elite 7-4-1 is what I use most of the time. Next on the list is the Mega Jaws Elite. It's a slower traditional gear ratio reel, 6-2-1. It's what we've all used most of the time, and this is a great reel. So here it is. Here's the reel that I use when I'm just winding something, the Mega Jaws Elite, a 6-2-1. It's probably the traditional gear ratio that most of us are using in spinning reels, but you'll find out after you use this for a while, and then you go back to a faster gear ratio, that, hey, I want that faster gear ratio because I know when I'm drop shotting and I want to reel in and make another cast, I know when I'm using this faster reel that I'm going to be more efficient on the water. I'm going to be keeping my bait in the strike zone longer. So I want to go to that faster gear ratio. But if I'm just throwing something out, like I said, like a swim bait or a jig head minnow, I'm going to use the 6-2-1 gear ratio reel for most of those. So there they are. Here's my spinning reels that I'm using, a 6-2-1 or a 7-4-1 to get the job done. So here it is. I've got 6 different gear ratio reels that I've got out here. 2 on spinning, 4 on bait casting that I use out there. So the 4 in bait casting, that's what gets the job done for me in that world. 2 in the spinning world, those are what I use. So hopefully understanding these gear ratios will help you out there and help you catch more fish.